Hello everyone, my name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Hi, hello, you are so loved and I'm so glad you are here. Today we are going to be diving into my top 10 reads of 2023. I don't need to waffle around it. That is today's video. I am so excited to be talking about these top 10 books of my year. I love it, and I will say this is going up tomorrow. So between now and tomorrow when this goes live, there is no chance of me reading any more books that make it into this top list because I got too much going on today. I don't have enough time to read an entire book. But I am filming this on December 21st. So there are still a lot of days left in this month that I could read a top 10 favorite book, but I don't really see it happening, so it's fine. We're just gonna talk about them. We're gonna talk about the 10 books, the top 10 books that I read this year. Favorite books of the year. I'm so excited. So this year was an interesting reading year. I do have, I believe, 19 5-star books that I read this year, but an overwhelming amount of those books are rereads, and I don't count rereads in my top 10 books of the year at all. So I think there are 12 5-star books that I could have picked from, and 2 of them I cannot differentiate from because they are part of the same trilogy, so they just occupy one space on this list. So I had 11 to pick from to sort through and put into favorites of this year. So book number 11 for that 5-star slot is an honorary mention and that is Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in Brandon Sanderson's Kickstarter surprise novel thing that he did this year out of, I believe, 4 surprise novels that came out this year. I joined in that Kickstarter and got the audiobooks because I'm an audiobook girly. I have to. So I was genuinely so excited to hear about Tress. I was just so happy that I read it as well. Princess Bride, which is what this is based on, is a book that I ended up reading with one of the book clubs that I have in real life. And we ended up reading it. It was one of the very first books we read in the first year of having our book club up. And then we ended up watching the movie afterwards, which was great because as someone who had never seen The Princess Bride, I know, the blasphemous, I had never seen it and I had never read it before. So it was very interesting to go through reading the book, which I didn't like super love as a hardcore fantasy reader. I didn't really love it that much. I have some issues with it, but watching then the movie, I can see how much of a cult following it has and how beloved it is. And it is genuinely such a cozy, fun film. So hearing that Brandon had watched that film and then his wife was like, oh, I wish Buttercup had more agency, and decided to write this book for her, I was in. I was so in. And this book was genuinely so fabulous. I went in with kind of like lower expectations because, as I said, I wasn't like the biggest fan of the book for The Princess Bride, but I like want to reread it and genuinely see how wonderful it is. This one, I went into it and I was just like, I'm just gonna have a great time. It's Brandon Sanderson. I came out absolutely loving this. The voice that this book has through the narrator of Hoyd, the narrator of this book, and who is a narrator that is prolific in the world of Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, was so fun. It hit that feeling of the satirical Princess Bride vibes. Like it had that doesn't take itself too seriously vibes. It knows what it's doing kind of vibes. It's like tongue in cheek. I had so much fun with this, and the world building was genuinely so lovely. And after reading this, I think convinced 2 of my friends who aren't like really super big fantasy book readers to read it, and they both loved it. So genuinely such a great time, and you don't need to know anything about Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere to enjoy this, even though as I was reading it, I did catch a lot of references. And I know there's more that I missed because I haven't read a lot of Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, but this was genuinely such a great read this year, and I really liked it. And I'm excited to continue with the Kickstarter books, but I think this one's gonna be my favorite out of all of them. I just have a feeling because I just loved it so much, and this is the one that I was most excited to read. We have 10 more books to talk about, technically 11 because one of the slots covers 2 books, but that's fine. I make the rules on my channel. Number 10 is a book that I don't own. Actually, number 10, 9, and 8 are books that I don't own, so I need to get copies of. But number 10 is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This is the only book on this list that is not fantasy. That is so funny. I mean, number 9 is like, it toes the line of fantasy. So yeah, this one is horror. But like a twisty kind of magical horror that T. Kingfisher writes a lot of. This is so good. Genuinely such a fun time. And I know a lot of folks who have read this have come out of it feeling kind of mid. I adored this. It is my favorite horror book that I have ever read, as someone who reads fantasy, as you can tell. I had genuinely such a great time with this. It is a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher, which is a short story that I read back in university when I was studying some American lit. We read some Edgar Allan Poe short stories. This is one of those short stories that has come up again and again and again throughout my literary career, and is something that I just think is such an interesting concept. Like, Edgar Allan Poe's concepts in his short stories that he explored were so genuinely creepy, and also like not enough. They were just like little tidbits of something, and I'm so glad that T. Kingfisher decided to make that tidbit of something into something really good, in my opinion. I had so much fun with this. It was a like one evening, sit down, read it, top to bottom kind of a read, because I love T. Kingfisher's novellas for that specific thing. It got the point across, it fleshed out what I wanted it to flesh out from the original short story. And honestly, it doesn't even really fit a retelling. It's like just an expansion on the Fall of the House of Usher short story. Oh, it was good. And it's got like sporer, is that what it's called? Spore horror, the fungal horror that's been like taking over a little bit this year that people really love. I genuinely love this. It was so much fun. And I don't really know if I can tell you anything more about this, because it's like, it's a novella for one. And if you haven't read The Fall of the House of Usher, I think you should read the short story first and then try the novella and see what I mean by the fact that it's just a great expansion on that short story. And I think you'll get so much out of it if you do it in that order. It's been many years since I've read The Fall of the House of Usher, but it is one of those short stories that just is in your mind, and it is short. It is a short story, so highly recommend doing that dual situation. Book number 9 is Squire by Nadia Shamas and Sarah Alfagay. I need to look up how to pronounce their last names. My goodness me. I read this recently, but this has become my favorite graphic novel of all time. I adored this. So one of my issues with graphic novels is the pacing and how much story you get. It is along the same lines of my feelings around short stories, usually. So most of the time I find this shorter form of fiction not enough. Not enough time to spend with the characters to care. It is not enough time to really get the full story. It just doesn't feel like enough, or it feels too rushed, or it just feels empty, all that kind of stuff. That's what I usually feel when it comes to shorter form fiction, like short stories and graphic novels. But this one was perfect in my opinion. It hit. It had the pacing, it had the fleshed out story. It felt like I was reading a fantasy book, like a YA fantasy book that goes through, like, main character goes away and stays at a war camp and learns all this stuff and has a mentor that then teaches them how to fight and also other stuff about life. And they learn so much through the fact that they now have friends, and they're also hiding a part of themselves, and they also have enemies at this camp, and then they get thrown into the deep end of the war and learn what war really means. And oh my God, this book was just, it was just fabulous. And the art is so stunning, and it feels like fantasy to me. So, and I think people have talked about it as fantasy leaning, but it doesn't have any magic in it, and it doesn't have any like characters that aren't humans in it. So I guess if you take fantasy as a genre that is strictly just otherworld, I guess this could be fantasy because it's not in like our world, but it is so heavily influenced by our world because it has been written by a Palestinian author. Very, very good. Oh my God, I need to get my hands on a copy and reread this just all the time because it was genuinely such a delight. Like, it gave me Avatar: The Last Airbender vibes. Just read this, it's so good. Number 8 is yet another T. Kingfisher. Sword Heart. This book was so fucking good. Oh my gosh, golly, it was so good, friends. This book genuinely delighted me, and it was, I think, my third at that moment T. Kingfisher book that I had read, which is funny because there are 3 on this list. So there's another one coming. There's another T. Kingfisher. T. Kingfisher really took over the year for me, for authors, for like the beginning of the year. Crazy. Anyways, Sword Heart. Genuinely so lovely. I picked it up knowing that it was a cozy fantasy adjacent book. So it definitely has a little bit of teeth. It's got something going on, but it was also my first like full-length novel by T. Kingfisher, and I was very intrigued to see what she would do with that, because previously I'd only read Nettle and Bone and House of Good Bones, which are 2 novellas. And then I believe after that I read What Moves the Dead, or at that point maybe it was my 4th T. Kingfisher. I don't remember. I read so many of them this year. But this one was genuinely so sweet, soft, lovely. It solidified my just love of T. Kingfisher's tropes for like the broody bodyguard love interest. Oh, it's my favorite. It's my favorite. I love this so much. It's genuinely lovely. So this follows our main character, who at the beginning of this is locked in her room by her family, who is trying to force her to marry a cousin so that they can keep the wealth that she has just inherited in their family. And she does not want to, obviously, because the cousin is an awful human being and spineless. She ends up deciding that the only way out is to unalive herself, which is a little brutal. But that first chapter is the funniest first chapter I have read in a really long time. Like, it seems so terrible and irreverent to say that as this woman is trying to kill herself, it made me laugh, because she's going about it at like the most ridiculous ways, truly. But fuck, it was so good. So as she's trying to off herself in her room, she unsheaths a sword with the idea that she's gonna spear herself through the heart with it. Like, she's gonna literally fall on the sword. As she does so, she unearths this warrior who has been tied and bound to the sword, and he takes one look at her and says, "No, what are you doing? Like, I am now sworn to protect you because you are the sword bearer." And they go on this whole adventure to try and like legitimize the will for her inheritance and like get rid of these people in her house and all this stuff. It is genuinely so lovely. I need to get my hands on a copy because I need to reread this. Like, it was so lovely of a read. I love it so much. Number 7 on this list is a very recent read, which is Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. Yes, this book made it onto my favorites list, my friends. So good. I don't even know what to talk about with this book. Like, it's the 3rd of a trilogy. It's the last one in the Daevabad trilogy. It is a beefy, chunky boy. I loved every moment of this. S.A. Chakraborty's writing, just from now reading this is my 4th of her books that I've read. Throughout each of them, I just have fallen more and more in love with it, and her storytelling and her political intrigue and the intricacies of the worlds that she's building and her characters, and how she was able to make me hate a character in book 1 and then love him in book 3. I'm talking about Alizade. And also hate a character in book 1, think of him as such a monster in book 2, and then know he's a monster but also feel so sorry for him and how broken he is in book 3. Daryavahush, Sheen. I genuinely, the characters in these books go through so much, and I was screaming the entire time I was reading this. And I not only finished this, but as I was finishing it, I convinced one of my friends to read this entire trilogy, and she read the entire trilogy in 4 days, which, how she did that, I'm not sure. Her audiobook speed listening is on par with mine at this point. Homegirl just listened to the whole thing back to back to back to back, and she would text me at like 10 p.m. with her like reactions to stuff. It was such a fun time. We almost ended up buddy reading The Empire of Gold because she was so speedy at listening to it. Oh my gosh, golly gee, like S.A. Chakraborty, what do you put in these books? Anyway, so the Daevabad trilogy, I should tell you, is about Nari, who is one of my favorite characters I have ever come across. Homegirl, badass. We love her. She's a baddie. She's amazing. She, at the beginning of City of Brass, which is the first book in this trilogy, gets swept away from her home in Cairo upon accidentally summoning an ancient warrior, Daryavahush Yafshin, and he recognizes her for what she really is, a Narid, which is this like ancient, believed to be extinct magical healer for Jinn, essentially. So he takes her on this harrowing journey back to Daevabad, where we then meet Alizade and the characters in Daevabad. And it's this whole political strife of the occupiers and oppressors in Daevabad and the different factions in the city in Daevabad. And like, nobody is right or nobody is wrong. Everything is shit. It's a political mess. There is a very tyrannical king who is arguably, my friend was like, he's such a villain. And I'm like, he's just a tyrant. I'm so used to reading about the Tyrant King in fantasy novels. Like, are they even villains at this point, or are they just reality? You know, like those kind of leaders of oppressive regimes. Anyways, when I was reading City of Brass, because I reread this trilogy this year, or I reread the first one to thus finish this trilogy this year as part of one of my series videos, you will receive that video after this one. So look out for the reading of this entire trilogy for all my insane thoughts on these books. But reading The City of Brass made me livid with the current political climate that the world is going through and the genocide in Gaza. Like, my blood was boiling reading City of Brass and then getting into the next few books, because S.A. Chakraborty is a fucking master, and all books are political, especially fantasy books, because they pull from real world. And oh my Christ, these books are so good. What else can I say? My coffee's really watered down at this point because it's been sitting here for hours, but so good. This is number 7. Number 6 is actually one of the very first books that I read this year, and one that I started back in 2022. And that is Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. This is a chunky boy. This is arguably my favorite Sanderson that he's written. This sequel is absolutely stunning. So this is book 2 in the Stormlight Archives. Everybody is correct when they say that this is the best book in the Stormlight Archives so far. Like, I've only read 3 of the Stormlight Archives: Way of Kings, this one, and then Oathbringer. And I can 100% confirm this is the best of the 3 that I've read. I don't even know how to express how wonderful these books are. Brandon Sanderson's world building and character building and just epic building is unparalleled in my fantasy reading experience. He is like no other on how he can weave these long 1,000-word tomes and make it almost impossible for you to put it down and read it in like a couple days. Like Way of Kings, when I first read it, it arguably did take me like a month to get through it because I wasn't used to reading epic fantasy on that scale. But by the time I got to the second one, yeah, I read this in a couple days. Oathbringer, read it in a couple days because homie just knows how to weave a yarn. Like he knows exactly how to make you so attached to the characters in here until like, as you're reading them and you're just getting to know them, you don't even notice how attached you are until you get to the end and you're just like weeping over everyone. Oh my God, the world building and the lore. I don't even know what Brandon is doing with these books. I don't know what direction they're going in, but I'm in and I'm here until the end. I don't even know if I can explain what these are about. They're just epic fantasy books that follow a whole cast of characters. It's got incredible, intriguing magic. It has ancient swords and armor that are passed down through winners and conquerors. And it's got a war that's happening in the Way of Kings that is arguably starting to crush the people who are orchestrating the war. And it's the other people who have been enslaved causing the war. And oh. Brandon. He is so good at what he does, man. I don't even know how to explain it. It's just so fucking good. And then on the flip side, guess who we have yet again? T. Kingfisher with Nettle and Bone. I love like the dichotomy of like my favorite books. Novellas to 1,000-word tomes or 1,000-page tomes. Iconic. But yeah, this is Nettle and Bone. This is my first T. Kingfisher that I have ever read. And it is my favorite that she's ever read. This is cozy adjacent, just like Sword Heart. It's got teeth. It deals with some darker themes. This is about a princess turned nun turned princess savior who sets out to do some impossible tasks to get the help from a hedge witch and also a bunch of other people who she brings together, ragtag group of people, to thus go save her sister from a tyrannical husband. It's amazing. And again, T. Kingfisher's bodyguard love interest trope, my favorite thing. My favorite thing I've ever come across. And I've only seen T. Kingfisher do it right. So, all right, so that was book number 5. Book number 4, so we're getting into tippy top of the year. Book number 4 is Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb. I talked about another one of Robin Hobb's books in my Almost Favorites video, which is the second book in the Farseer trilogy. This is the third. This year has been a fantastic year of finishing series, which I'm going to talk about more in my bookish like wrap up stats goals video coming. What I really discovered this year is how wonderful authors get with their trilogies as they go on. I have read so many series in my life where the second book drags, feels like a bridge book, and then the ending is a little unsatisfying or just isn't in the way that I thought it was gonna go. As is evidenced by the fact that there have been so far 2 third books in the series in a trilogy on my favorites list of the year. Maybe that's turning around. And honestly, I would be so happy if it did. I know a lot of people don't love the way that she ended this, but I really enjoyed the way she took these books and the way that she started in Buckkeep with the first 2 and very insular stories that only occasionally branched out when they were going up to visit Ketrican up in, oh gosh, where does she live? Where's the map? Up into the Mountain Kingdom. And then in this book, Robin Hobb really said, bet, okay, we're taking Fitz on an adventure. And he literally goes on a quest. And I think this was a absolutely fascinating character study, and it's just proving how wonderful Robin Hobb is with her characters and the just impeccable way she crafts a character and their arcs from book to book to book to book. I adored these books, and Assassin's Quest was just, to me, like perfection in a slower churning epic fantasy. Love. Drum roll for number 3. We're gonna be talking about The Sword of Kaigen. This book ruined me. This is such a wonderful fantasy standalone that I have had on my radar for so long because so many different creators have said that this is one of their favorite fantasy books of all time. And that's such a high claim that I was a little nervous to give this one a go. But I decided to read it this year. I couldn't put this down. This is over 600 pages long, and I read this entire thing in a day. I could not put this down. I was at the cabin, I was listening to it, reading it, and it was one of those moments where, which hasn't happened to me in so long, where I was reading it, walking around the cabin, doing other things, like helping with dinner, all this kind of stuff, with my nose in the book. Even though I was listening to it too, like I could have put it down and just listened to it, like I couldn't physically put this book down until I got to about here. And then I needed to put it down because I was crying too hard. And then the rest of the book just felt like an anvil to my chest. Like it just, stunning. So this follows a family, mainly a mother, wife, and the son of this epic warrior family who lives on this very treacherous mountainside called the edge of the Kaiganese Empire. And it's where these like ancient warriors have lived, and they are like the defense of the empire, if you will. It's baffling. Like the tech in this book is also really baffling because I thought it was like an ancient fantasy medieval vibe. No, it's like more modern, but this particular area is very ancient and stuck in its traditions. But we see like the outside world come in from a few different characters who come in from the outside world and bring tech from the outside, bring news from the outside, you know, bring reality to some of the characters in here, lift the veil that was covering one of the characters, Mamoru, his eyes, like he's like a 14-year-old boy, and he gets shown reality for the first time through a classmate who comes in from outside, and him and his father, the classmate and his father, are here really to install like these, I think the equivalent in my head is like a cell phone tower. Like they're here to install these towers where they can bring technology to the Sword of Kaigen. So Mamoru is the focus for the first half of the book, and then his mother, Mizaki, is the focus for the last half. Oh, Mizaki is one of my favorite characters I have ever come across. Like there's something about an epic warrior woman who has decided to stop being such an epic warrior woman just to be a mother and like live a softer life. Oh my God. Give me women with swords any day. Women with axes, women with swords, especially mothers with swords and axes. Like, oh my God, this book is so fucking good. Like I want to reread this one day, but I don't know if I have the capabilities to do it soon because it ruined me. Like I was sobbing reading that. Like, oh, this is one of those books that ruined me this year. There weren't that many this year that really took a knife to my heart, but this one did. All right, friends, we're down to the top 2. So second spot is for 2 books. technically for 3. But as I said, I don't include rereads on this list. So we have the Broken Earth trilogy, specifically books 2 and 3 in this list, in the second spot of this list, because I can't separate these two in my head. I read this entire trilogy back to back to back to back to back. I reread the first one and then dove into the second and third for one of my very early series situations this year. And it quickly became my favorite trilogy of all time. These two occupy the second spot on this list because they were that good. And I cannot separate the two of these in my head because I read them too close together. And this entire trilogy is a trilogy of 5 stars, friends. Like, that is so rare. Every book in this trilogy, 5 stars. Iconic, incredible, we love it. So the Obelisk Gate and the Stone Sky follow and continue the story that is set up in the 5th season. These books are a mastery of storytelling. I don't even know if I could explain to you what these are. Like, we set up in the first book following 3 different POVs. We follow a U POV where Esun, who is the character in the U POV, who is you, trying to find her husband and her daughter after her husband murdered her son, for discovering what he really is, which is a Orogene, which is what Esun also is. And in this world, Orogenes are these very stigmatized, hated people with the powers to essentially control a lot of the Earth's movement and forces and stuff. Very cool powers, let me tell you. But they are also used as tools by the government, obviously, to help restrain a lot of the Earth's movements and stuff, because in this world, every so often the Earth gets really fucking mad, and thus occurs a 5th season, which is essentially a season of like strife and apocalyptic levels of end of the world stuff. And so we start book 1 at the start of the end of the world. And we continue that, following Esun and the other POVs as she's trying to track down her daughter. And then we also end up following her daughter in some of these, like N.K. Jemisin, one of my favorite authors of all time. Like, truly, the mastery in her stories, unparalleled. But yeah, those books are the second spot on this list. And finally, my friends, my favorite book of the year. You guys know, if you've been following my channel for a long time, you know, because I talk about this all the time, and I tell you that it's my favorite book of the year all the time, and that is Darkwater Daughter by Hannah Long. This book is so fucking good! This blew me the fuck away. Like, Hannah Long is one of my favorite fantasy authors of all time. She is one of my favorite humans that I've met online. Like, I'm so lucky I can like call her a friend. Like, I know her, she lives in Canada like me. We chat sometimes online, and it makes me feel generally like just so, like, I know people who are people. Like, that's just, I love it so much. Her world building that I have read in her series, The 4 Pillars, I've been calling it Hall of Smoke, the Hall of Smoke series in my head for so long that I don't remember the actual name of the series. I apologize. But yeah, the Hall of Smoke series, of which book 4 is coming out in January. I'm so fucking excited. Has been some of my favorite fantasy that I've read in the past few years. Hall of Smoke, genuinely one of my favorite fantasy books of all time. This beat it out. Her world building is absolutely gorgeous, okay? Like, it beats out Brandon Sanderson's world building, in my opinion, all right? And I just went on a whole diatribe of Brandon Sanderson's world building. Like, homie is so good at it, and Hannah Long beats him out, because there's just something about the vast wilderness, and oh gosh, like, the only thing that's coming to my head is like Skyrim levels of gorgeous, like, world building. It's just stunning. That's what Hall of Smoke is. Darkwater Daughter is a flintlock fantasy. So, pirates, my friends. This follows 2 POVs. We have Mary and Samuel. Mary is a storm singer, and storm singers in this world, if you are found out to be a storm singer, you are tied into the service for the crown. Essentially, you were tied to a ship because storm singers can like help quell the weather and make sailing a lot easier. And Samuel is a pirate hunter. Mary ends up getting caught up with the wrong people, not really her choice, but she ends up getting caught up with the wrong people, getting found out by them that she is a storm singer, and thus sets off this journey of her being kind of bounced around between pirate ships and pirate hunters, and Samuel the whole time being like, I'm trying to chase this notorious pirate and also sort of save Mary. I don't know. She intrigues me. The weather magic in here is stunning. I could not stop reading this. so fucking good. Oh my God, the lore in here, stunning. The magic, stunning. Genuinely, read this. Like if you pick any book off this list, which I hope you read all of them because they're all fucking amazing, this one, pick this one. It is so good. Oh my God, I cannot wait for the second one. I cannot wait for the second one. It's coming out in 2024. It's my most anticipated book of the year. Hannah is the best. Oh my God. All of these books have been absolutely stunning this year. As I keep saying, absolutely stunning. Stunning! Yes, I'm referencing the Negroni Spagliato. Ooh, stunning, you know. All of these books, genuinely favorites of all time. Wonderful, incredible books. You cannot go wrong with any of them ever, my friends. I genuinely recommend every single one of these. Obviously, you need to add them to your TBR right now. I'm sorry. I know your TBRs are so long, but you have to because I said so. And I'm asking so nicely, please. Oh my God, we've made it. We've made it to the end of this list of 11 books, technically 12 because of these two bad boys up here, that I absolutely adored reading this year. Top of the year, cream of the crop, best books that I read this year. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'm going to go put these back on the shelves and just dream about them for the rest of the year. But anyways, my friends, I will catch you in another video very, very soon. Literally, so soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.